We're now live, Chair.
Thank you. Andy, do you want to start? Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this remote meeting of the South and West Plans Panel. My name is Councillor Caroline Gruen, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. South and West Plans Panel deals with the applications from the south, northwest and west of the city. And the aim of the panel is to hear all the relevant information from applicants, members of the public and council officers to help members of the panel make their decision. I'd like to start the meeting today by confirming that this meeting of the South and West Plans Panel meets the requirements of the Council's constitution, even though members of the panel are in remote attendance. While items today will be fully discussed as usual, remote attendance requires a few slight changes as to how I'll manage the debate. Therefore, can I ask all attendees to mute their microphones unless I invite them to speak? This will avoid disruption from background noise. Can all participants please keep their cameras on during the meeting? All participants will be invited to introduce themselves at the start of the public session to make it clear to public observers who will be involved in the proceedings. So I ask for your assistance and patience while I go through this process. In order to avoid any disruption to the meeting, should I lose internet connectivity, I propose we appoint a vice chair who could step in during my absence. And I would like to move Councillor Heselwood and invite another member to second that motion, please.
Second, the Chair.
Thank you very much. So I will take silence as agreement. Thank you. Any objectors? Any abstentions? And I don't see either. So could I now invite members and officers to introduce themselves and then mute your microphone once you've done that. So I'll start with councillors and go in alphabetical order. Councillor Anderson.
Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlin Wharfdale Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Kayleigh Brooks, Little London and Woodhouse Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Colin Campbell here.
Councillor Finnegan.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Robert Finnegan. I'm a councillor for the Molly North Ward.
Councillor Heselwood.
Councillor Julie Heselwood, councillor for Bramley and Stanley Ward.
Councillor Hamilton. Well, we had Councillor Hamilton earlier on, didn't we? Perhaps she's just had some difficulty. Oh, she's there.
No, I've been here all the time, Chair.
Yeah, sorry. I think you were muted. Sorry, Councillor Hamilton. Would you like to introduce yourself again?
Yeah, it's Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Meanwood and Moortown Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Reagan.
Councillor Denise Reagan, good afternoon, from Bermondsey Richmond Hill Ward.
Councillor Ray.
Councillor Paul Ray from Hunslet and Riverside Ward.
Thank you. Has Councillor Shemilt managed to join us yet, please, Andy?
Not yet, Chair. One of my colleagues is just trying to get hold of her.
Thank you. So I'll now introduce the officers. I hope it will be all right with you if I use first names just to help us through this. Steve?
Steve Butler, Group Manager for South and West and Lead Officer at South and West Plans Panel.
Jonathan?
Yeah, good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
Carol?
Good afternoon, Carol Cunningham, Team Leader for North West, Leeds.
Mike?
Good afternoon, Michael Doherty, Senior Planner, South and West Housing Growth.
Ahmad?
Good afternoon, Ahmed Hunaidi, Senior Highways Development Control Engineer.
Thank you. Susie?
I don't think we have Susie on the call, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Nicole?
Good afternoon, Nicole Walker, Legal Advisor to the panel, and also my colleague Nikki Diol, should I lose connection. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa?
We don't have Lisa.
No Lisa either.
Chair.
Okay, thank you. Toby?
And we don't have Toby. we've got Lewis and Louis here from their team.
Okay, so Lewis?
Good afternoon, my name is Lewis Footer and I'll be in charge of the panel PowerPoint today. In the case of any incidents with my internet, we have Louis Ellsworth as my backup.
Thank you very much. And Andy?
Yeah, Andy Booth from Governance Services, and I'll be the clerk to the panel today.
Thank you. So moving to agenda item 1.
Right,
Andy? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So under agenda item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under item number 2, there are no items which require the exclusion of the press and public. Agenda item number 3, there are no late items of business. Agenda item number 4, could I ask members if there are any disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? And I'll take that silence as a no. And under agenda item number 5, there are no apologies, Chair.
Thank you very much. So item number 6 is minutes of the previous meeting held on the 4th of March. Do members accept these minutes as a correct and accurate record, please? I will take a few seconds, but I will assume that you believe they are correct unless indicated otherwise.
Well, both Colin and I want to come in.
Yes, that's the next thing. I'm going to ask if anybody has any matters arising. So if you have matters arising, please indicate. I'll take them in the order that they have appeared. Councillor Campbell.
My one isn't a matter arising, it's a level of accuracy.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Apologies, Councillor Anderson. I must have failed to notice your hand. Would you like to come in first then?
Yeah. We've all received emails from the Airborough Civic Society. How are officers going to deal with the issues that they have raised?
Steve, do you want to come in on that one?
Concerning what, Chair? I haven't received any.
Would you like to...
Steve, the Chair has been sent an email by the Civic Society. Are you saying that you've not been copied, that you weren't passed that by the Chair?
I'm not blaming the Chair, Councillor Anderson.
Well, I'm not blaming the Chair either. I'm not blaming the Chair either. I mean, it's been a matter of public contention, the accuracy of the minutes of the last meeting.
Just bear with me a second.
Yeah, Chair, Steve, I think I did forward it to you, but if I didn't, then it is my mistake.
I'm just checking, Chair. Just bear with me.
Councillor Campbell, was yours on the same issue?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, it was. I think, in effect, the email came from the Airborough Civic Society, who, give him the due, give Clive Woods his due. He's actually watched the webcast of the
all the way through.
All the way through.
Yes.
And married it up against the minutes. And his view is that the members in the meeting said something slightly different than what's written.
Yes.
On page 10.
Yes.
So I think both Barry and I are in the view that perhaps it would be better if we now, the members were now very clear about what they were wanting the officers to do with this deferral. So there's no dispute later on, I think, is the best way to describe that.
I wonder if the best approach would be to return to this, perhaps after the presentation, to give people an opportunity, including Steve, to have another look at what was said in that email.
Chair, I still haven't got the email, I'm afraid. So it's not on my list anywhere.
Right, Nicole, you want to come in?
Chair, if I may, yes, just in relation to minutes, it's absolutely right that members are satisfied that the minutes are accurate reflection of what happened at the meeting, but that is members. It's for members to decide and move whether they think they are accurate, and obviously having regard to the fact that they're not a full verbatim note. So whilst obviously members might want to take into consideration what any representations from people that have been made to them in relation to the minutes, it is actually a matter for members to decide whether the minutes are accurate or not, rather than third parties.
Right, but I think members were saying they did feel they were inaccurate on the basis of what was said in this email. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, can I come in? Because I I think I was one of the councillors that was trying to gain clarity in the last meeting as to what we were agreeing to, and my recollection of that meeting isn't reflected accurately in these minutes. Thank you.
Okay, would you like to say what your view, Councillor Brooks, of what the minutes should say is?
So it says on page 10 that the applications be deferred for further discussion with regard to the design and materials for the first floor extension, and to provide more detail on the conditions. But my understanding was that we were to have further discussion as to whether the extension was even appropriate.
But can I come in, Chair? Councillor here, that was my reflection as well, because there was a discussion about, I think the comment was, we can't really design the material by committee, but there's actually a fundamental question over whether or not the actual second floor extension was actually reasonable or not. And I think that probably the two have got crossed. I think in the conversation was, we can't debate the design because it's to personal taste. It's whether or not the principle of having that second floor extension was appropriate or not, and that's my recollection of the conversation as well.
Oh, actually, my recollection of the conversation was that we decided we had insufficient information to make a decision because the quality of the materials that we'd been given were not clear enough for us to understand what was being proposed. That was my understanding.
Chair, if you recall, there was a point where I think it was Councillor Kaylee Brooks was potentially thinking about moving for a refusal. But because the panel seemed a little bit split between that and just the materials, I intervened and asked the panel, I thought quite clearly, as to what the majority decision was, which I took away as being that the principle of having the first floor extension was acceptable. But as the minutes reflect that the materials were wrong, we needed better graphics, and we would also spend some time trying to reduce the number of conditions. And then when that was actually put to the vote, it was unanimously accepted.
Yeah, I must say my view is that we simply felt we hadn't got enough to work with to make a decision because nobody on the panel had a clear view of what that extension was really going to look like. There was certainly discussion about materials, which there was general agreement needed to be looked at. Where do we go from here, Nicole?
Nicole, you're muted.
Sorry. Do you want to defer the consideration of the minutes until later in the panel, and perhaps an officer can revisit that on the actual meeting? I'm just trying to look through my notes, but I haven't found them as yet from the last meeting. But members need to be satisfied. What we can't do is we can't re-agree something that wasn't agreed at the time. Members do have to be satisfied that the minutes accurately reflect what they moved and resolved. So perhaps an officer could step out of the meeting and re-listen to that meeting or that item just to come back and confirm further. And hopefully we can do that before the end of this meeting.
I'm happy to proceed in that way. Are others?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
I see no dissent. So we'll continue from the point at which we're at now, and we'll ensure that the minutes are agreed before the meeting is finished.
Sorry, Chair. Somebody needs to do that. Jonathan,
okay.
Jonathan, are you able to do that?
Oh. Yes, I wasn't at the previous meeting, so it'll all be fresh to me. So I'm quite happy to do that in the interim.
Sorry, I had to put it on you, but if you don't mind, whilst we continue with the rest of the business.
Yeah, if the Chair's happy with that, yeah.
Yes, I'm happy with that, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you.
So agenda item 7, land off Middleton Park Avenue, and we'll proceed with the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. The application for this scheme seeks consent for 116 dwellings and a 60-bedroom extra care facility with communal areas including a salon and a cafe, along with a roof garden together with associated highways and public open space works. The application is being brought before Plans Panel as it constitutes major development within the ward and is being delivered via the Council's housing growth programme to provide 100% affordable housing along with the extra care provision and accessible bungalows. In addition to this, the scheme is a departure from the site allocations plan as well. Can we have the first slide, please? Thank you. So this is obviously just the site location plan. So the first slide outlines both development sites. So there are actually two elements of this scheme. As you can see, the larger central site is known as Throstle Recreation Ground, and that forms the bulk of the developable area, which currently consists of a large flat triangular area of land, and it's utilised as grassland and open space at the moment. Access is to be taken at 3 points to this site, 2 Throstle Road at the south of the site and 1 to Middleton Park Avenue, which is on the left, to the west, sorry. The additional smaller site to the west of the larger site is also to be developed for affordable housing. And this site sits to the south of Middleton's Children's Centre, and access to this area is taken from Throstle Mount off Sissons Road. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just to give members a further insight, this is an aerial of the site. So obviously the surrounding context features 2-storey semi-detached and terraced properties, predominantly brick built, obviously consistent with the wider Middleton area. The bulk of the larger site, as you can see on there, is grassland, which is maintained by LCC. There is actually a sports pitch, which is not particularly clear on this aerial, which is located to sort of the southwestern corner of the larger site. And again, you can see the smaller site to the west of the larger site, which is currently vacant, and it was cleared some time ago off Throstle Mount. Next slide, please. So this slide, just wanted to give members an idea of how the site's actually allocated. So the larger Throstle Recreation Ground site is in effect split centrally. As you can see there, the western portion shown in the beige colour is the housing allocation. And then the green colour to the eastern side is green space. So the smaller infill site to the west is also allocated for housing. And the allocations basically outline that the larger site is capable of delivering 140 units, with this development totaling 153, so it exceeds the allocation. And similarly, the smaller site is outlined as having a capacity of 15 units, and there are 23 units proposed on that smaller site. Next slide, please. So slide 4 shows basically the site layout. So this gives you an idea how the development will sit within the site. So as you can see, the development to the Throstle Recreation site sits around the perimeter of the site with a central area of green space retained. So strictly speaking, this is a departure from the SAP as highlighted previously. However, it's only via a reorganisation of the areas, which are again highlighted in the beige and the green. So as you can see, the area, the new enhanced area of green space is to provide centrally. This does retain a dedicated sports pitch, along with providing new paths, access and planting. The area also includes dry attenuation basins, swales and sustainable drainage measures which serve the development. And these areas are to feature new planting and biodiversity enhancements to achieve a net gain as required by emerging policy. In addition to this, the green space features a number of informal play areas and seating for both use by residents and the general public. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just a bit more of a detailed site plan for members. It's a further illustration. You can see the extra care facility is situated to the west of the larger site, which addresses Middleton Park Avenue. It's a 60-bed facility, which features its own dedicated servicing and parking area to the north, which includes a new substation and energy centre. Below this, a new courtyard area is to be provided to the south of the building for the use by the residents, along with planting pathways to provide a seating and exercise area and general amenity space. Around the extra care block, or a building if you like, are 16 fully accessible bungalows are there to be provided with their own dedicated gardens, parking, but they can obviously access the internal green space and courtyard area of the extra care facility, as can the general public as well. The remainder of the properties throughout the sites are termed general needs, which basically means they provide provision for general housing requirements. However, it's noted on this scheme it is 100% affordable housing. There are flexible adaptations built into these properties, obviously as they've been developed through the housing growth programme. So should adaptations be needed, there are things such as knockout panels and provision for things such as lifts if specific people need adaptations to those dwellings. The properties are a mix between 2 and 4 bedroom units, as outlined in the panel report, with off-street parking served by the proposed highways layout shown. There are a total of 93 dwellings to the larger site, and there'll be 23 units to the smaller site to the west. So just in terms of highways and access to the site, there are new access routes to be provided, obviously internally within the site. This was subject to amendments from Middleton Ward members who raised concerns about rat running and the use of the development as a cut through. So just to highlight to members, you can see that there are a number of turning heads which have been provided within the development itself, rather than direct routes all the way through the site. So highways officers have been consulted on this. They're supportive of the scheme, subject to the attachment of conditions, which obviously need to be discharged at a later date. The scheme is also subject to a number of traffic calming measures internally, so there are speed bumps and other measures which obviously reduce the speed of traffic going through the development. Next slide, please. Just to give members an idea on the extra care block, this is a visualisation of the care facility. This is the elevation facing Middleton Park Avenue. So as you can see, it's to be erected in predominantly red brick, with an emphasis on a 2-storey form at the front, which is similar to the context of the area, which is 2-storey properties. The facade is broken up with large balconies serving the residential units, which feature grey brick detailing set back from the facade itself to create shadow lines, and these do have glazed balustrading to them as well. The entrance area includes floor-to-ceiling glazing with a seating terrace, which will serve the cafe bistro area, and it also serves both residents and the general public, with an area of planting and landscaping to the front of the extra care scheme. The entrance canopy features steel fretted panels, which you can see centrally there, which gives it a naturalistic appearance, again in grey and copper tones, providing a sheltered area whilst retaining an open feel to the entrance. The slide in this example also shows the proposed roof terrace area. So the extra care facility does feature a roof terrace. This was designed to basically replicate the 2-storey form to the front of the block, and that obviously provides an amenity space to the roof for residents as well, and that's going to feature things like planters, seating, and it is set back from the front of the facade, subject to landscaping conditions as well, which will need to be discharged at a later date. Next slide, please. Again, this shows the extra care facility from a different angle, again from the front of Middleton Park Avenue. Indicates proposed landscaping buffer, which is to be along the front of the site, and soften the appearance with new trees planted along that row as well. This probably gives members a better idea of the split level design. So like I say, it's 2-storey to the front, which was sort of designed in mind to reduce the bulk and size of the development facing the highway. The block features, like I say, split level, and it's 3-storey at the rear. This element's finished in a light brown cladding to tie in with the front balconies, again using naturalistic colours, broken up with grey windows, which serve residential units within the block. The scheme's been amended from a green style cladding with a more angular design to the upper floors, which was considered out of context within sort of the Middleton area and generally within the site location. Next slide, please. Again, a further view of the extra care, just to re-emphasise to members, this is set back from Middleton Park Avenue, again indicating the roof terrace area to the front with a steps back design. In addition, you can see one of the fully accessible bungalows there to the left of the picture, which are being built around the extra care facility. And again, these are tied in similar materials, so matching red brick with grey brick as well, creating sort of a sympathetic relationship between the two. Next slide, please. So this gives an outline of the area to the rear of the extra care building. This is an area where they're going to create a courtyard garden. It provides a walking circuit for residents, for both residents and visitors. So obviously they can exercise in this area. And it provides general amenity along with seating and a grassed zone centrally, along with tree planting and landscaping. And again, this area is subject to the landscaping conditions which are suggested on the panel report. Next slide, please. Just to re-emphasise to members, this is a slide which shows the detailing of the rear of the block. So obviously we have centrally there are textured brick panels which are in between the window openings to break up the bulk and mass of the block itself. Along with the balconies set well in from the external elevation, which feature grey brick to create shadow lines whilst tying in with the wider development. And again, there's please note the use of the grey brick and the grey windows, which obviously tie into the development of the balcony areas as well. Next slide, please. So just moving on to the general housing within the site itself, or within both sites. This is within the larger site, the Fossil Recreation Ground. These are the typical properties which feature a gable detail to the front, along with pitched roof and alternative types of dwellings, as you can see there, to break up the massing and bulk of the row. The properties feature contemporary design to tie in with the extra care building and wider residential housing, which obviously, as I've said previously, is predominantly 2-storey red brick. They feature grey roof tiles with a grey flat roof canopy above the main entrances, along with front brick boundaries and railings, as you can see there. They do incorporate Juliet balconies with large windows to the front and rear, and again creating a contemporary appearance, basically aiming to provide a modern type house, modern affordable housing. And just to note, this slide also shows the highway arrangement which I referred to before, which prevents some of the routes being a direct cut through to the site as well, to prevent issues of antisocial behaviour and, like I say, rat running, which was highlighted by the Middleton Ward members. Next slide, please. Again, the general house types, which you can see here, they feature a grey brick panelling detail around the Juliet balconies, which tie into the grey windows, and obviously the roofing and the canopy as well. Off-street parking is provided to these properties through the provision of driveways as per the street design guide. And as you can see there, they do provide open frontages, which hopefully should provide good level of surveillance and outlook for residents of those dwellings as well. Next slide, please. And just in terms of connectivity to the site, this indicates the through routes, which allow obviously the general public to sort of integrate and cut through the site, if you like, which are obviously subject to landscaping as well, and planting areas to soften the hard boundary treatments and the walls. Next slide, please. This slide just gives an overview of the green space and the development as a whole. So as highlighted, it's retaining the sports pitch centrally within the site, and this is surrounded by a new network of paths, planting and multi-use green space areas. So there's new seating, there's informal play areas, which feature things such as boulders and logs, like I say, for exercise and general amenity play, with picnic areas as well. Next slide, please. Just to give members a view, this is the pitch itself. So obviously a view across the pitch and the wider development. Obviously you can see there are tree planting areas beyond the pitch, and that's where the areas of sustainable drainage and habitat creation is to take place, obviously alongside the green space. And you can see that the dwellings overlook the central area of green space, which should provide an open feel within the development. Next slide, please. And moving across to that area from sort of an aerial view, this shows where the sustainable drainage measures will be incorporated within the site and the multi-use area. These are basically to be planted up and landscaped with a dry attenuation basin, swales, and obviously these areas remain open for play and interaction via obviously people as well through the paths which intersect them. Next slide, please. Similarly, this just provides you with a ground view of that area, so that it shows you the proposed planting and landscape arrangements. And as highlighted, these provide a dual function in that people can walk and play, etc., through them, whilst providing a sustainable drainage strategy for the development and biodiversity enhancement, sorry, as well. So yeah, they do have a sort of dual role in that sense. Similarly, this area will see new tree planting, and again, as mentioned previously, these are to be controlled by the conditions and details to be agreed with landscape officers as well. Next slide, please. So just the final view of the green space with planting and seating, along with the proposed pathways and the swales, which you can see there, which intersect the site. And obviously the tree planting as well. So that just gives members a final view of the central green space. So just to conclude, in relation to the presentation, the scheme is considered to positively contribute towards the delivery of our site allocations plan, in line with identified users, and it does seek to deliver much needed affordable housing and a care facility within the area. It is noted, whilst it's a slight departure from the SAP allocation, it is officers consider it acceptable in these specific circumstances, considering obviously all of the issues. Officers conclude that the benefits of providing 100% affordable housing scheme, extra care facility, contribute to the council's housing supply, also attract weight with the on-site green space enhancements, which deliver a significant improvement. So the scheme is recommended for approval, subject to consideration by the Secretary of State. And that's the presentation concluded, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mike. That's very helpful. Before we proceed, in all the kerfuffle around the minutes, I did overlook inviting Nicole to give us our usual annual reminder about PERDA. My apologies. We'll do that now, Nicole. We haven't proceeded on the debate yet, so I'm sure it's appropriate.
Yes, thank you, Chair, no problem. So yes, the Chair's asked me to advise members that the purpose of the PERDA period, which you'll be aware we are now in, is obviously not to prevent the council carrying out its normal business, but it is to prevent the business conducted by the council not being used or having the potential to be perceived as being used to secure any electoral advantage. So as such, I've been asked to advise you to please treat this panel as a normal plans panel meeting, but please be mindful of debate that amounts to or could reasonably amount to being perceived to electioneering. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole. We can now proceed. We don't have anybody to speak against the recommendation, but we do have a submission which is going to be read out by an officer. Would that officer like to come forward? Lewis, I think it's you.
Yeah, that's me. Yep, I will. I'll read out the comments that have been left. So these are by Helen Kelly, and she states, in the document supplied by the council, they state that Middleton Primary is in close proximity of the proposed build. There is no mention of the fact that there is another primary school that has already been built and a high school that is in planning stages half a mile away from the site. This speaks volume as to how overcrowded the area already is. South Leeds has the second highest population growth in Leeds and Middleton, and is already the third largest council estate with over 4,000 houses. The council has sold off land in the area to other housing developments, the main one being at the top of the golf course, where the for sale sign still stands, stating that it would be an ideal site for specialist people's accommodation and ideal for older people's accommodation. If I hadn't been working today, I would have felt very uncomfortable and not very confident doing Zoom, as I would suspect a lot of other people would be, especially with the older people. It is not right to assume that everyone reads the Evening Post and that everyone is connected to the internet. And as for planning notices up during lockdown, it is making a mockery of the situation. And this should have been put on hold until a proper meeting could take place, one that was advertised on the notice board at the church on Middleton Park Avenue, as this would have encouraged people to speak up and ask questions and got the answers there and then. By saying that, when I asked Judith Blake how many houses were going to be built, she was very economical with the truth and twice said it at a few points. At no point did she say that it would be 179 houses. Middleton Park Avenue and Thorpe Lane are horrendous at certain times that they are used as a cut through by people living in the Rothwell, Arsey, Robin Hood, etc. And it is not just cars and buses. Heavy goods vehicles delivering to Asda and B&M farm vehicles are forever thundering past because of the location of the local farms. Throstle Road was until recently a dead end, another development I wasn't informed about, but it is now used as a cut through to Asda and as a way of avoiding the Thorpe Land and Park Avenue junction, and it will only get worse once the high school is built. It is bad enough now trying to get a doctor's appointment, and it won't improve with the 179 housing developments on the health centre. NHS dentists in the area are already non-existent. Develop the area, but develop it for the people who already live here and have gone without for years instead of adding more unsustainable housing, which will cause more problems in the long run. As if this end of Middleton is the poor relation compared to the park end, where they have always received money and funding for parks and roads. In the words of one of the council on Twitter, we need to make sure everyone can benefit from parks and green space. Easy to say when your homes look over a park and not just brick and mortar. A lot of people around here don't want to see the fields used for housing, but are of the opinion that it's the council and they're going to do it regardless. That is where a public meeting would have come into play, and I feel the council is using COVID and the lack of public meetings to push things through. Middleton has one of the highest COVID rates. Could this be due to the fact that it is already densely populated? As I've stated previously, I'm not very confident with the internet and would have liked the chance of public meeting, but I hope I've put my points across, and I am quite sure I will have forgot something. One last thing, leave the football pitches where they are. I enjoy watching Carlton play on their sport and should be encouraged here and not just Middleton Park. Maybe that way the antisocial behaviour might decrease for the area. And that's all.
Thank you very much, Lewis. And just to emphasise for any of the public observing that was not Lewis actual speaking, that was Lewis speaking for an objector. Thanks, Lewis. So we do have some people here to speak in favour of the recommendation. We've got the council's project officer, we've got the head of housing growth, and then we've got the agents here too. Steve, has anyone indicated that they are going to speak for the group, or how the time will be divided?
No, Chair. I think if we just go straight to and ask them themselves directly, please. Okay. Would one of those individuals like to indicate to us how you would wish to split the time, please?
Chair, I'm just going to speak. It's Ruth Turnbull.
Thank you, Ruth. You're going to take the 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's absolutely fine in your own time.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Ruth Turnbull and I'm the project manager for this scheme, and I'm supporting the planning application for the site at Throstle Recreation Ground in the Middleton ward. Richard Merrills and Rob Jagger from Watson Batty, the architects for the scheme, and Mark Denton, Head of Council Housing Growth, are also available to answer any questions you may have. In support of our application, I'd like to make the following 4 key points. As set out in the officer report, the site has an allocation for housing and was not within the green belt prior to the SAP adoption. We've managed to design a high quality scheme which retains and significantly enhances the green space and existing sports pitch provision, which will benefit the whole of the community. The scheme will provide one of 7 new extra care schemes for older people, providing on-site care and support as part of a citywide programme supported by Exec Board in 2017. These new facilities give our oldest residents a safe, secure home with on-site care and support. They also act as hubs for families in the local community with access to the communal facilities provided within the extra care, which will also welcome local residents at the restaurant and cafe. Specialist housing for adults with physical and sensory impairments will be integrated nearby in the bungalows with access to the extra care facilities and communal gardens. These homes are the first for this client group to be delivered in the city and reduce inappropriate and out of authority housing placements. There is a massive shortage of affordable housing across the city, with over 900 households waiting for a new family home in the ward and an average of 264 bids per property, which a scheme will also help address. We've worked very hard to engage the local community, ensuring that letters went out to around 1,400 local households before planning was submitted, with a comment card and free post envelope. Social media and other outlets were also used. We also work closely with local ward members to take on comments they received and believe our proposals have addressed key issues, including introducing traffic calming and limiting access through the site to prevent antisocial behaviour, enhancing the access to and quality of the green space for all local residents, retaining the sports pitch and significantly enhancing the biodiversity of the site through planting trees and landscaping measures. The Council Housing Growth Programme is committed to delivering homes and places of the highest quality. All the homes will be highly energy efficient and benefit from a district heating scheme to support our climate emergency aims. The scheme will bring benefits to the wider community, with the contract arrangements ensuring that around 75% of local labour and spend is from contractors within 40 miles of the site, and that 85% is focused on SMEs. We estimate that this will support up to £25 million of investment in the Leeds pound. This is a truly inclusive scheme which provides specialist housing for a number of disadvantaged or vulnerable groups, along with benefits to the wider community. We hope that members can support our application today, and happy to answer any further questions about our proposals.
Thank you, Ruth. Can I invite people now who would like to ask a question? Colin, is that an old hand or a new one?
Well, it's an old and a new. Can I just apologise, Chair, because I knew there was something I had to say about this application, and I was just having a quick look at it. I'm remembered. I'm a member of Wade's charity. And therefore, I think it's probably inappropriate of me to speak or vote on this particular application. But I just thought I'd better say that at the beginning.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Can that be noted under declarations of interest, please? Okay, so am I taking it that you're not going to be involving yourself in this debate?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. Are there any questions for Ruth, please? I don't see any questions, Ruth, or for anyone else who's in attendance for the purpose of answering questions. Nope, I don't see that either. So that's fine, thank you. Would members have any questions now for the officers, please? Never known panel so quiet. No questions to the officers? In which case we can move straight to comments on the presentation and the scheme, please. And I've got Nicole indicating.
Chair, I'm terribly sorry. There seems to be a lot of procedural issues with this meeting today. It's just an issue with regard to the fact that we are in a remote meeting. So usually any member that would remove themselves from an item would remove themselves from the room.
Yes.
So would it be possible for us to just pause while we're able to move Councillor Campbell into the waiting room, and then we'll bring him back in for the next item, just so the meeting fully reflects what should happen as if we were all in one place.
Thank you for the reminder. Cheerio for now, Colin. We'll see you after the agenda item. Okay. Has he gone, Andy?
Yeah, I've put Councillor Campbell in the waiting room, and I'll bring him back in when we start the next item, Chair.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Finnegan first.
Thank you, Chair. I know this area well. This green space is the heart of the Middleton community. Now, the old skills centre, which again I know well, I've really no problems or difficulties with that being developed. But if the other side, the sports ground, is developed, then it really is imposing quite radical surgery to the green heart of the Middleton community at this particular stage. And it will have a fundamentally negative impact on how Middleton looks, and I'm sure how Middleton feels. I'm inclined to agree with the objector, who basically suggests that this particular location is one that is worth protecting and preserving. Middleton has seen a hell of a lot of housing. A lot of its green spaces have disappeared over the years as a lot of new and private housing has been developed. And Middleton does have other areas, other locations where extra care, which in principle I'm happy to support, can be built. But I think this is too radical. I think it's too extreme an exchange of the green heart of this particular community, and I'll not be supporting this particular element of it. It's the right building in the wrong place. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Reagan, please.
Well, I totally disagree. I think it's an excellent scheme. I think it's a scheme that's well needed within the area. I think it aims to enhance the green space, and in fact it's giving a better pitch for people to use and for more community use, and I think it's excellent, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reagan. Councillor Ray.
Very much echo what Councillor Reagan has said. I think it is in a reasonable location. Let's not forget this is SAP approved, as it were, so it's also been through the rigors already. It's already got the principle of development agreed. There is a significant need for this type of extra care facility. I think the design is well balanced. It will enhance the usable green space in there, and actually probably enhance security and reduce antisocial behaviour in the area, because it will be enclosed by residential properties of a high standard. The fact that it's going to be 100% affordable is frankly fantastic. And as much as we all lament the loss of green space, the actual amount of green space being lost is negligible, because it's about the same as the site allocation plan has said has to remain there. So I think on balance, yes, no one likes losing green space, but it's SAP approved. The design is well balanced. It's meeting a significant need, and it will probably enhance and improve the area's antisocial behaviour issues and the green space for the public's use.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ray. I've got Councillor Brooks next.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with my colleagues, and I'd also like to say, well, to compliment it on its good design. It seems to be a very, very high quality design, using appropriate materials for the area as well. So I'd just like to add that.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. And I've got Councillor Anderson.
I apologise for coming where I'm coming up on this one. In paragraph 93, the very last sentence, it says, "It is acknowledged an objection has been received from Sport England. However, it's considered the replacement sports pitch and much enhanced multi-use green space addresses these concerns." Now, I actually agree with that comment by the officers, but the mere fact that that's in here, should we be getting clarification on the Sports England's position? I am actually in agreement with what the officer has written, But because the officer has taken the time to put that in the report, should we be getting clarification on the current Sports England's views?
I'll go straight to Steve on that one, and an in principle answer first.
Chair, Mike might be better because he's obviously got more access to the consultation. But in essence, we were aware of their objection. But I think on balance, all the other benefits of the scheme outweighed that objection in our mind, hence bringing it forward. And the majority of the green space is actually being retained, just relocated, and the small short fields being covered by a financial contribution. So it was one of those occasions where, because unusually we don't often disagree with Sports England, but on this occasion, the other benefits of the scheme or material considerations outweighed that objection. Now, I don't know if Mike wants to add anything further.
Well, I think it would be helpful. I think Councillor Anderson was really wanting to know what exactly Sport England had said about it and what their position was. Michael, you might be in a position to recall that for us.
Yes, Chair. Basically, Sports England's objection was on the basis of the loss of the playing fields, what they constitute playing fields. Obviously, the playing pitch is being put back, but they objected on the loss of the playing fields, which they considered. Obviously, when a pitch is in use, it can then be sort of rested while these other areas are played on. But just to echo Steve's comment, obviously on the balance of things, the pitch is going back, which is obviously a positive. But the actual way the site is allocated, if the housing allocation was just built on solely, there isn't actually a requirement on that bit of the site which is allocated to put a sports pitch back. So this scheme, with it actually building across the housing allocation and the green space, is actually sort of a mixture of both. So it's obviously providing the housing allocation and putting a pitch back, which if they were developed separately, or if the housing allocation was just developed on its own, you may actually see that site developed without a pitch at all.
Thank you very much. Does that clarify the position for you, Councillor Anderson?
Yes, I am supportive of the application. I just wanted clarification of that particular point.
Thank you very much. Councillor Heselwood.
No, it's just a request that we start including the Sport England objections, because I remember at panel last meeting there was a Sport England objection on the sports pitch in Wortley, finally Wortley, that we were looking at, and I had to ask for clarification then on that. So just a request to back that up. Can we start including these in, please? Because obviously these are relating to green spaces, which is really important to us at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Councillor Heselwood, because as the chair who's been briefed previously, I just assume knowledge, and you're quite right. If it's not explicit in the paperwork you're given, then we need to work harder to make it more transparent. Very helpful. But I think for today's paper, we've had the position of Sport England clarified sufficiently. If anybody feels we haven't, please indicate. Are there any more comments? I've got Councillor Hamilton.
Yes, Chair. I was just supporting my colleagues by saying that I really like this development, and working with the ward councillors and taking their views in as shown. When the developers work with us, how we can get things done and take into consideration. And the other thing I was going to say with regards to the additional pre-planning consultation, 1,400 letters were sent out and only 7 people reply. I'm really surprised at that, because even if you had an open meeting, I don't think 1,400 people would have attended. But to say they've received it through the letterbox and fail to have a say apart from that objection that's been read out. I'm just surprised at that. And to say, is this a precedent we're setting, for others? Because people normally complain that they've never seen the sign, they didn't get a chance, and you've gone above and beyond, and just to say, well done.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. I can't see any more hands. But I would also like to make a comment, very much to echo the comments that have already been made in favour of this development. And I'm really encouraged that colleagues think that it is a good design, a good quality of design, because we did push on that a little bit to get that variation, just that bit of variation in materials and texture. And I do know that that the officer, Mike Doherty, worked very hard with the developer to get that out of them, and the landscaping as well. So clearly it's had an impact. I think it's really good, all affordable, very well laid out, green space included. I also agree with the fact that we haven't lost so much green space as to be harmful to the development, and that it will probably end up being better maintained and cared for as part of that development. So I personally am very much in favour of this development. I can't see any more hands with comments. Steve, could you kind of sum up where we've got to before I ask for a proposer?
Chair, just caught me on the hop there because I'm still trying to look at the minutes of the other the other item. Okay. I think in general, although a couple of the members obviously have some concern about the loss of that, what's seen as a loss of that green space, the majority of members are in support of the application. Therefore, I think it's appropriate to go to see if somebody will recommend the motion.
Can I have anybody to propose?
I'll recommend the motion, Chair.
You'll propose the recommendation.
Yeah, happy to second.
Right, we've got a proposer, and it was actually Councillor Brooks I heard, although somebody came in beforehand. But if I can take Councillor Brooks as a seconder, thank you very much. And we'll have to vote in the usual way, I'm afraid, because we're still remote. So please indicate how you wish to vote when I call your name. For or against or abstain. Councillor Anderson.
For.
Councillor Brooks.
For.
Councillor Campbell. Oh, he's not here, of course. Councillor Finnegan.
Against.
Councillor Hamilton. I think you're muted.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hesselwood.
For.
Councillor Reagan.
For, Chair.
Is Councillor Shemilt on the call? I'm assuming not.
No.
Councillor Ray.
For.
Thank you, and I am also for. So that is clearly carried, but perhaps, Andy, you'd just like to summarise the numbers for us to be clear for the recording.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Of the 8 members present to vote, 7 were in favour and 1 was against.
Thank you very much indeed. That was clearly carried. Thank you. So once again, Steve, do you want to say anything finally about that application? I think it's very clear. It's been well supported by the panel.
Yes, Chair, just to be absolutely accurate, that the application on majority vote has been approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So agenda item 8, we'll move straight on if members are happy to forego a break, given that it's a shortish agenda. Can't see anybody objecting to that. So we'll move to item 8, please. The detached house with the detached carport adjacent to the gables in Horsforth, please. Can we proceed with the presentation?
Thank you, Chair. This application is of a detached house at the side of garden of an existing house called the Gables. The application is brought to the Plans Panel by Councillor Collins and Councillor Taylor due to highway impacts.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you. Did we bring Councillor Campbell back?
I've seen him, I think.
Yeah, he's back in the meeting, Chair.
He's back in. Thank you very much. Sorry, please proceed, Carol.
Okay. There have been a previous history of a residential development on this site, with an application withdrawn in 2016 due to officer concerns in relation to highway impacts, visual amenity and neighbourhood amenity and impact to trees. And then we refused an application in 2018 on highway safety issue only. Can I have the next slide, please? The original Sorry, that one, thank you. The original application involved an access of the A65. This is now changed to an access of Hall Lane. Now on this aerial photograph in front of you at the moment, the site is on the corner of Rawdon Road and Hall Lane. And you can see onto the Rawdon Road, there is a high hedge on that side when there's a stone wall, which you'll see when you see the street scene. You can see to the sort of north of that image, there are two large trees. They form the boundary to the existing house and will be retained as part of this development. And then you can also see that there's the side road of Hall Lane, which is on the opposite side of the site. Can I have the next slide, please? This is showing you the site. You can see the hedge that I've just talked about on the right-hand side there, which forms the boundary onto Rawdon Road. And then there's also the parking spaces that I'd like to show you, which are on Hall Lane. You can see where the yellow lines end and where the parking spaces begin. Can I have the next one, please? There's quite a few slides here showing you different images along Hall Lane. This again is showing you where the yellow lines are. It's showing you where the parking spaces are at the moment. It's difficult to see on this image, but you'll see it in the next image, but there's an existing gate there on the right-hand side. And the new access for this will be between that gate and the nearest sign that's got the yellow site notice on it. Can I have the next slide, please? This is a better photo of the boundary onto Hall Lane. When we dealt with the previous applications, which we refused on highway grounds, the proposed access was similar to where the gate is at the moment. And you'll see in another image how close that is to the parking spaces that are on Hall Lane. The new access has now been moved, and it's between that existing gate and that sign that's got the yellow site notice on it. So it's moved it further away from the parking spaces so that the visibility has been improved for cars exiting the site. Can I have the next one, please? Again, that's just showing you a closer relationship. So you can see how close, when we refused it previously, the access was in relation to those parked cars. And it's now been moved further away, so visibility is improved for cars leaving. They can see cars coming down from that side of Hall Lane. Can I have the next one, please? This one's just showing you, that's the white building there is the existing house, the gables. So you can see it's a white gabled house with tiling. And then these are the two existing trees, which previously a scheme looked to damage the trees. They were the previous house was too close to these trees, but now the scheme that we've got in front of us today ensures that these two trees will remain on the site. Can I have the next slide, please? This again is just showing you another image on Hall Lane, showing you the car parking spaces and the site. And you can see the hedge there that forms the other boundary. Can I have the next one, please? And that's showing you the site again and the junction down at the bottom where the Hall Lane meets Rawdon Road. Can I have the next one, please? This is showing you the site on the other side. This is what you have on Rawdon Road. You've got this nice stone wall. You've got a high hedge. The original scheme, as I said, did have an access on here, but for you who all, if everybody who knows the A65, we considered that it was inappropriate to have an access along there. And there was also the concern about breaking into that nice stone wall and hedging. And if you look at the next slide, this has a longer view of, this was taken in the summer where we hope to get there again. This is showing you the long view, which we officers considered breaking an access into there, as well as the highway safety implications would have been unacceptable in terms of the visual impact on the street scene. Can I have the next one, please? So this is the proposal, the site plan. As you can see, there's the gate that will be closed. There's the new proposed access, and you can see its relationship to those existing parking bays that I've shown you on the photographs. This is just showing you the house on the site. It will be a 4-bedroomed property. You can see that there's a good garden between that house and the existing boundary of the gables. And there's an open carport that will go into the corner on the junction of Hall Lane and Rawdon Road. Can I have the next slide, please? This is just showing you the floor layout. It shows you that it's a 4-bedroomed house. I don't really have a great deal to say about the actual floor layout. And then can I have the elevations on the next slide, please? This is the elevations. The west elevation will be the view that you'll see as you're coming into Leeds down Rawdon Road. And the proposed south elevation will be the view that you'll see from Rawdon Road itself, and with the north elevation being the view that you'll see on Hall Lane. The house will be white rendered and will be tiled roof to match the existing property of the gables next door. Can I have the last slide, please? And this is showing you its relationship in terms of the existing street scene. So the upper section shows its relationship in relation to the existing house. And you can see the open structure carport that's on that image. And that's the image that you will see when you're actually on Rawdon Road. And then the other image is showing you its relationship to the property on Hall Lane. And again, that's the image that you will see as you're coming down Rawdon Road if you were travelling in the direction of Leeds. In terms of the issues, the main issue that's been raised by the ward members is highway safety, with the proposed access out of the site being obscured by those parking cars I've shown you on Hall Lane. As I've stated, a previous application was refused as it was considered these parking obscured visibility from the proposed access. However, the access for this development has now been moved further away from the parked cars, therefore improving visibility when leaving the site. There was also a concern about the additional traffic at the A65 junction, but it's considered that one additional property will not have any significant or adverse impact on traffic flows within the area. And there's adequate parking provision for the size of property provided on the site. Just a couple of other matters in terms of visual amenity. The property's overall size and proportions are reflective of nearby properties. There is a setback from Hall Lane and there is space retained around it. The overall design is reflective of and sympathetic to the locality. The existing boundaries will largely remain, which will help to blend the proposed property into the existing street scene. And in terms of residential amenity, there is adequate distances to the other properties to not cause any detrimental impact on residential amenity. The property exceeds the requirements of policy H9 in terms of its internal space, and the garden area proposed exceeds the garden requirements within the neighbourhoods for living. And that concludes the officer presentation.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you very much. So we have Councillor Jonathan Taylor and Councillor Jude Arbuckle to speak now. Could I ask those two colleagues if they're intending to split the time between them? Andy,
hello, Chair.
Hello there. Hello,
Hi.
Jonathan.
Yes, we are intending. I think I'm planning to take 2 minutes.
Okay.
Jude will be speaking for the.
I'll take 2 minutes. Unless any of the neighbours want to speak instead.
Well, we do have you down as the named speaker, so I think we need to stick to the plan at this point.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Taylor, can I ask you in your own time to make a start, and we will indicate when the time is up.
Oops, I was already unmuted. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to my colleagues on the panel. As you'll have noted from the report, this application has a history of refusals. It predates my time as a councillor for Horsforth, and is in fact one of the first applications I remember learning about from officers who until recently have found issue with it for various reasons. In the report, you'll note that my ward colleague, Councillor Collins, and I have expressed concerns to officers over a number of issues. Again, until recently, these concerns were shared by officers. The shape of the site is unusual, and the building proposed would take up a large portion of it. However, the main issue that we have with this application is with traffic. Looking at the parking options, it would seem likely that a multi-vehicle household would struggle to turn on site, meaning it's likely vehicles would be reversing out of the driveway. And this is particularly concerning as for anyone who knows that turn off the A65 onto Hall Lane, it's serviced by a bus stop that is often doubled by a slip road with many vehicles travelling at 40 miles per hour. Coming towards the A65 on Hall Lane and shown in the drawings on the pack, there are a number of parking spaces that severely impede visibility when leaving the proposed exit. Hall Lane is currently a 30 mile per hour zone, and vehicles coming towards the A65 and around these spaces are forced onto the opposite side of the road, making a collision due to speed and poor visibility likely under the current plans. our proposals to make Hall Lane a 20-mile-per-hour zone have so far not been implemented by Highways. Despite the best efforts of Highways to accommodate the applicant, firstly by attempting to move the exit directly onto the busy A65 and at a busy junction, and then by looking to remove the footpath along the perimeter and place parking spaces in its place, both of these options were ruled out on safety grounds for motorists and pedestrians. The default position, which is presented here today, has been unacceptable to Highways for over 3 years that I've seen this application, and it should still be considered so now. Councillor Collins and I echo the concerns raised by neighbours and recorded in the pack that quality of life will be impeded due to the size of the proposed property, and danger exiting vehicles would pose to them and other motorists using Hall Lane. Thank you for your time. Councillor Collins and I will welcome any questions from you as panel members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I have Councillor Arbuckle next, please?
Yes, indeed, I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me speak on behalf of I have two hats really. One is I'm a resident of Hall Lane, and the other hat is I'm a member of Horsforth Town Council. So, Mr. Chair, is it okay for me to approach it from those two corners?
Certainly.
Yes. Well, the first one is that I support, obviously, the decisions of Horsforth Town Council's Planning Committee, feeling that we have touched on the features of an overdevelopment of the site and limited parking space provided. But also from a resident point of view, it's a very strong feature in that the parking, the traffic flows on Hall Lane have increased significantly over time. First of all, we have two features to that. One is that the rat racing that developed now since the development or improvements of Horsforth Roundabout, which is simply nearby, that people will be use that Hall Lane, especially at 8 o'clock in the morning. So you have a queue back right the way past to almost the third part of Hall Lane of traffic waiting to to access the 65. Then at 4 o'clock in an evening, the opposite thing happens. Same traffic, queued the right way back into Hall Lane, wanting to exit the A65. So there's a true traffic flows that seem to use that lane to a great extent, and obviously the development of the gables would simply be, I suppose, in a sense, closed in
2 minutes, Chair.
by the sheer number of cars.
Could you make your final point, please?
Yes, sorry, I got carried away there. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes,
thank you.
My final point is that I do support the objections of Horsforth Town Council in every respect, and would strongly advise traffic to look seriously at these particular flows and the quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to both of you for coming along and sharing those thoughts with us this afternoon. Do I have any questions, please, for the speakers? Councillor Anderson, I think that's a fresh hand you've put up.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question for Councillor Taylor. You said in your presentation that there are a number of long-standing objections and that officers were sympathetic to those objections, but all of a sudden now we've got the application before us. What has changed, or what explanations have you had that from officers to try and mitigate the objections that you've had? What has changed from when they were objecting along with you to the position we've got now?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. It seems that there is a slight movement of the exit where previously the exit was coming out through the gate, but now it's been moved ever so slightly away from the parking spaces, which in my opinion, if you were to stand there doesn't offer a greater deal more visibility from that side, and actually brings it closer to the junction with the A65, which makes it even more dangerous coming out of there, as far as I'm concerned. I do have to say I am baffled at the sudden about face of highways on this, that they've gone around the house in this one in trying to find a way to make the exit acceptable, and have yet been able to find a way to make it safe, in my view. And I think it's unfortunate at the moment that panel members aren't able to get there, because if you were to stand where the exit is being proposed and where it's been proposed previously, you would see just how severely impeded visibility is from the right-hand side looking out of the development, and how dangerous it is with cars coming around at some speed from the A65 to the left.
Yeah.
Chair, would you mind if I make a brief comment?
I don't mind at all, Councillor Collins, as long as it's in line with the procedure. Can you advise me, Nicole? Is that okay?
Chair, if Councillor Collins is responding to questions as part of the speaker with Councillor Taylor, then that's fine, but we wouldn't usually permit speakers to just make comments.
Yes. Is this in response to the question that has been asked, please, Dawn?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Yes, in response to the question, I think the only other thing that's actually changed is that it's a new highways officer, or a different highways officer, I should clarify. And when the highways officers reviewed this application, we were in COVID and lockdown. So the amount of traffic at that junction was considerably reduced. And you can actually see that from the photographs, that there's no cars there. Other than the two parked ones. So really, I think it's the key problem is that the maximum amount of traffic that will go along there is at the peak times in the morning and the evening. It is seen as a cut through, as Councillor Arbuckle said, but unfortunately, I don't think the highways officers have been able to see that because of the reduced traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any more questions, please, of the speakers? And I don't see any more hands. So we can proceed to speakers who are now here to speak in support. Nigel Ormondroyd, are you present with us?
Yes.
Yes, you are. Okay. So if you'd like to speak, starting in your own time, please, for a maximum of 4 minutes.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Nigel Ormondroyd, and I'm the agent for the application. The applicant, Roger C, and his family live in the Gables, and the proposed house would be in the garden area to the side of their home. They have lived in the Horsforth area for some time and are very proud to be part of the local community. Roger has therefore been mindful, whilst considering the development, not to propose anything that would be inappropriate to the area and have a negative impact on his family home. He also asked me to confirm that the financial gain is not a motivator for the proposed home. And I would add that if this was the aim, I would have suggested a different type of development, which would have increased any potential value of the site. The house is an opportunity for a self-build project that will remain in the family for the foreseeable future. To add to your understanding of the history of the proposal, I'd like to confirm that the 2017 planning application for the site was withdrawn because the Hall Lane parking spaces were introduced after the application was submitted. And so we withdrew the application to allow further consideration of the impact on the application. The 2018 planning application was originally submitted because the applicant was told by the council that the car parking spaces on Hall Lane were going to be removed, so that this would no longer be an obstacle to the proposed dwelling. Whilst the application was being considered, the intention to remove the parking spaces was rescinded and resulted in a refusal. Following further consultations with the Highways Department and the Principal Engineer, Andrew Thickett, it was agreed a suitable access could be provided off Rawdon Road. So the new application was submitted with a revised design to suit the new access. There was a period of further discussions with the planning officer, Susie Watson, and the highways engineer, Gurdon Shergill, and it was Gurnham who proposed the current design for the access off All Lane. So I changed the design to include his recommendations and agreed some changes to the house design with Susie Watson, which is the scheme that you are now considering. So there has been significant amount of discussion with both the planning department and highways to ensure a suitable design. The main concern raised by the objectors is the one of highway safety. However, the Highway Development Engineer's report concludes that the proposal is acceptable in highways terms and therefore would not increase the risk to safety as perceived by others. It should be noted that there is the opportunity to turn cars around within the site and that the houses opposite that are existing don't have that facility. So to move on, as you can see, the planning officer's report that the proposed scheme complies with all the local and national planning policies and will not cause harm to the character and appearance of the area. The report goes on to confirm that the proposed dwelling will not have any adverse impact on the living conditions of the neighbouring properties. The applicant supports these views and would like you to give them due consideration while deliberating your decisions. In conclusion, I would urge you to follow the recommendations of the planning officer and approve the application, which I feel is the result of a thorough design and consultation process and provide a potential family home which will be an asset to the neighbourhood.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ormonroyd. That signalled your time up, but I think you fitted it in well. Thank you. Are there any questions, please, for Mr. Ormonroyd? And I can't see any hands, so I can go straight to questions to officers, please. And we have Ahmad with us, for I expect most of the questions will be directed for Ahmad. Councillor Anderson. You're muted, Barry.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, I've got a number of questions, and yes, they are about highways issues. Because we've not been able to go onto site, are we allowed to use or show Google Streets at all at this application? So that's question number one. Secondly, why were the yellow lines put on that road in the first place? What was the purpose behind them? Secondly, do highways officers have any concerns about traffic leaving a 40-mile-per-hour zone? And bearing in mind that if they've been travelling at 40, they are certainly not going to be down back to 40 by the time they reach this house. So what rough speeds are they allowing for at that particular point? Next one is, if a car was coming out and there were cars parked legitimately in the car parking provisions there, what effect and what reduction will that be on the visibility displays? Because the visibility displays, if there are no cars there, will be a measure. And then if you remeasure them once you've got the cars in place, what's going to be the reduction? What is the accident record on that road? Because there was no mention of it here. Is there an accident record? And are these official accidents or residents / councillor reported accidents? And the final thing is, because bear in mind, I think if I see this correctly, this is a 4-bedroom house. If additional car parking was needed, would the residents be expected to park in the allotted spaces that are already there? Or how would highways officers anticipate the parking would be generated? Thank you.
Thank you. Lots of questions there, Councillor Anderson. You may need to remind Ahmad on the way through. Ahmad?
Sorry, Chair, can I just say, could we have the site plan back up again? Because I think it'll help the highway officer when he's answering these questions. It was slide 32. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Ahmad, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. With regards to your first question, Councillor, in terms of vehicles approaching from the bend, the on-street parking bays, as they're occupied, they will automatically deflect traffic into the other side of the road, and therefore the visibility would be able to if somebody's waiting to exit that junction, they will be able to see somebody approaching that on the other side of the road. We have been on site visit, me and another highways officer, during COVID, and it's not to observe the number of traffic and the queuing, because as you said, it's not representative. It's just to see and double check the visibility and the behavior of traffic around that bend. Generally, as traffic approaching that down, and we ourselves, we have driven down Hall Lane, on average traffic is doing between 15 and 20 miles an hour. And the requirement for to achieve that visibility is between 25 and 30 meters for an exit, for somebody's waiting to exit to look to their right. The encroachment to the on-street parking bays is very minimal, i.e. it's only the first parking bay. If it's occupied, then it would impede visibility. But if you're approaching from the bend, you would be able to see somebody's bonnet, or the person who's exiting the minor arm. You'll be able to see the front of their car, and therefore you will act accordingly and respond to that. And we've seen that behavior already happening, where vehicles are approaching down Hall Lane, and there is vehicles on the other side of the road. They'll automatically give way to them, because the obstruction is on their side. So they'll wait for the vehicles on the other side to go across before they make that decision as drivers to then proceed to Hall Lane. In terms of road safety, in our Leeds City Council's records and the public records of Crash Map, there hasn't been an accident reported of any severity since 2012. So there's no existing highway safety issue that would be exacerbated by the proposed development. In terms of the internal car park, so the two proposed car parking spaces, they've got between 15 to 12 meters at the back. So they would be able to reverse back sufficiently in order to exit the junction in forward gear. And this meets the street design guide criteria and the draft transport SPD. If there's an additional car for that user, there isn't anything at the minute stopping them using these on-street parking bays. Because it's a 4-bed dwelling, the requirement is 2 parking spaces, and they have provided 2 parking spaces. Having said that, they still have sufficient internal area to have a 3rd car there without affecting, without causing somebody to reverse back onto Hall Lane. I hope that answers all your questions, Councillor. Thank you.
There are 3 things haven't been clarified. One is if we can use Google Streets or not. Secondly, why the yellow lines were put there in the first place. And thirdly, when I referenced 40 miles per hour, that is this. I accept what you've said about 15 to 20 coming down Hall Lane. I've got no dispute with that whatsoever. Where I do have concerns, if cars are coming off the A65 at 40 plus, because if a car is meant to be, if the speed limit's 40, we all know that roughly 10% plus 2. So we're talking about cars being there at round about 45 miles per hour coming off onto Hall Lane. What allowance have you made for that? So that's the 3 questions: Google Streets, yellow lines, and the 40 mile an hour. I accept what you say about the 15 to 20 coming off of Hall Lane. I'm talking about coming onto Hall Lane.
Thank you. Can we just clarify, Councillor Anderson, on your Google Streets question? Do you mean, can we use Google Streets in this meeting as a paper for everyone to use?
Oh, yeah, is
that what you meant?
Yes, what I'm asking is, can they be shown on the screen? Because with Google Streets, you can actually take a position on a road and you can actually look at the visibility. Because we've not had a site visit today, I am willing to accept that if we can't use it, then fine, that question drops. I'm only trying to add a bit of value so that because we've not had the site visit, Google Streets would have given us an idea as to what the visibility displays are.
I think that might be a question for Nico. Say if I'm mistaken, Nico.
No, Chair, I'm just actually trying to work out what the rule is. But I mean, as we know, Google Street Maps is publicly available to individuals. What I don't know we could even do today, if we were allowed, was to be able to get to the point where we can show members that. But that doesn't mean that members couldn't have a look separately if they're able to during this meeting at that. It's certainly something we can look into for future meetings, but I think even if we could get access to it, would be difficult to then present it at this meeting unless anyone can tell me otherwise.
Chair, I was just going to add there are often copyright and licensing issues. So yeah, we'd have to check that. To be fair, we can use it for just using the aerial photographs and the satellite stuff. But the other thing we'd have to look into. I suspect it's a licensing issue, but there's been effectively a company, Leeds City Council.
I also feel that I might have a bit of difficulty with individuals accessing it and some not, depending on how many screens they've got available and what their access issues are. That would mean that some would have the advantage of it and some would not. So I'm not too happy with that. But
I'm happy with that ruling. I was just asking the point to try and add a bit of clarity.
Okay.
And also I wanted it so that we all saw the same thing at the same time, rather than some of us doing research and others not.
Yeah.
Because I think we should all see the same thing and all base our decisions on what we see, not anything else we get passed to us or anything like that.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. And if this was going to go on much longer in the form of Zoom, then I would suggest that we look at what the possibilities are. But hopefully we will be finding our way out of this tunnel sometime soon, and the problem will no longer be with us.
So in that comes down to just why the yellow lines and the 40 miles per hour, please.
Yeah.
Ahmad.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. The 40 miles an hour, if you're exiting Roden Road, there is a deceleration, sort of a bus lay-by sort of thing, and that's there for a reason. So this will slow traffic down if you're approaching junction, as you would do, there are clear road signs that this is a 30 miles an hour road. So we would expect drivers to reflect that. The road itself, Hall Lane itself, it does act as a speed reduction measure. So vehicles, as they exit from Roden Road, they will act they're supposed to act accordingly to Hall Lane. In terms of the double yellow lines, we usually provide them if the approach is to a secondary if it's a strategic route, the A65, or a secondary distributor road. We provide them if the junction bellmouth does not meet the junction at a perpendicular angle, and that's the reason where we could support at some point historically providing the double yellow lines. It would also stop vehicles parking on the north side, on the opposite side of the proposed dwelling, because these driveways to the north do not meet the visibility requirements because as the road shapes and the bend of the road. So there's two features to the double yellow lines, and it's mainly in the interest of highway safety.
Okay, thank you for that.
I'm just checking something. I'm trying to find a picture. Yeah, where the entrance is going to be, there are double yellow lines there just now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of highways questions, and if you please know a non-highway question. Just confirm for me, what's the speed limit on Hall Lane? Secondly, the marked out parking bays on Hall Lane seem a bit of an anomaly to me. Who uses them? And the third question, which is probably for Carol, the boundary treatment onto Rawdon Road is a fairly substantial hedge. I was just wondering why we weren't asking perhaps for that hedge to be extended round the curve of the bend to provide a bit more screening for the proposed development. Thank you, Chair. Those are my three.
Thank you. That's fine. So we'll take Ahmad first, if you could, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. The Hall Lane is subject to 30 miles an hour speed limit at the minute. The use of the on-street parking bays, they've been provided recently for residents on the other side of Hall Lane, and they've been provided in the interest of parking capacity and a highway amenity, really, because we understand from historically there has been a requirement for these.
Thank you. Does that fulfil the highway side of it, Councillor Campbell?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Carol? You may be on mute, Carol.
Yes, sorry, I was trying to find the arrow and direct it to the mute. Yes, I mean, if members consider it would be appropriate to have that a condition to extend that hedge further round, I don't have an issue with that, and I can see the benefits of doing that. So, you know, if you're minded to approve it with that additional condition, then I would be happy to support that.
Thank you. Are there any more questions, please, for officers? And I can see no indication. So can I invite comments, please? That's it. I've got Councillor Campbell, Councillor Heselwood, and then Councillor Anderson. So I'll take Councillor Campbell first, please. You're on mute again, Colin.
Sorry, Chair, I'd forgotten to lower my hand.
Oh, right, that's fine. Councillor Heselwood.
Yeah, could I just make the point that the chair of this committee is a woman and not a man, and referring to her as Mr. Chair is unacceptable. As lead member for women, this is happening far too often, and I need to call this out every time it happens. Thank you.
I knew you were going to say that, Councillor Heselwood. Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
The only comment I've got is I am concerned on the highways grounds. I accept that in theory, people should be slowing down to be an acceptable speed coming off of Rodden Road. But experience tells me in my own ward that what's expected and what's reality are two different things in terms of what's happening here. And I am also concerned that if we have needed double yellow lines and the residents opposite do need the car parking spaces, that's even less space if people are coming to visit this property as well, as to where these people would park, and if it's the visitors will be parking there, where are the residents going to park, and what's the anticipated build-up of problems. So I won't be able to support this application because I'm not satisfied that the highways angle has now been satisfactorily resolved. Thank you.
I can see that Mr. Ormonroyd wishes to come in, but the only way that I can ask you to come forward is if it's in response to a question that's being asked, Mr. Ormonroyd. So I don't know whether Councillor Anderson wishes to ask you a question or not.
It was in regard to a question he did ask of somebody else regarding the highways.
Nicole, is this in order with procedure?
Chair, we are on to comments now. Presumably members felt like all the question had been answered.
Yes.
Unless...
It's just sometimes occasionally a question comes out of the debate and we do ask somebody to come forward, but I don't think that's the case today. Okay. Okay, so yes, any further comments, please? Right, do I have a proposer for the recommendation at all?
I'm happy to propose the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Reagan. So I have a proposer and a seconder. So I'm going to ask for your vote in the usual way, please. For, against, or abstain in alphabetical order. Councillor Anderson.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
Abstain, Chair.
Councillor Campbell.
For.
Councillor Finnegan.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Hamilton.
For.
Councillor Heselwood.
For.
Councillor Reagan.
For.
Councillor Shemilt. Is she with us still? Still not. Councillor Ray.
For.
And I am for as well. So if you'd just like to sum that one up for us, please, Andy.
Chair, just one quick comment.
Oh, sorry, I didn't ask you to summarise, did I? Sorry, Steve.
No, it's fine. I just want to make clear to members, because there was a question raised about an additional condition about hedge planting around the perimeter, and I'm assuming that all the members were in support of that, for clarity.
I certainly was. If you're not in support of it, please indicate. I think
neither for or against.
Okay, well, that's fine. I think we have general consent to that issue, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to make sure we were clear. Thank you.
Okay, so yes.
Sorry, I'll just.
Steve.
Well, I thought you'd asked me to summarise.
Yes, I did.
I think Andy needs to just check on the voting, because I think I got slightly caught out again, but I think the majority of members were for approval of the application. Andy, could you just remind us of the numbers, please?
Yeah, we had 6 voted in favour, 2 against and 1 abstention.
That's what I got too. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, so that's clearly carried. Thank you very much indeed. And that almost brings us to final business, but we do have the question of the minutes to settle before we finish the meeting. Nicole, could you just tell us what our choices are here? For example, do we have to agree them today, or could we carry them over to the next meeting while we look in more detail at the issues that have been raised?
So there are several options available for members. You can either move the minutes other than, I think it's item 6 that's an issue, and defer that to the next time. Or you can defer all the minutes. Or what I can say is that Jonathan Carr now has had the opportunity to re-listen afresh to the recording of the last panel meeting. He is able to confirm what was discussed and what was moved, and then I am able to advise on that if required. But it's entirely up to yourself how you would like to deal with that.
Well, as Jonathan has done that research at our request and has the information, I think we ought to give that a first go. But I can see Councillor Campbell wishes to come in.
Sorry, Chair, trying to find the mute button there. I'm happy to listen to Jonathan. Can I just say one thing in relation to Google Earth? The issue of members using Google Earth arose some 5 or 6 years ago, and it was decided then that we couldn't use Google Earth or one member's version of Google Earth to assist panel unless every single member had access to it, and that's not always possible, Chair. So
and I would agree with that entirely, Colin. I think it would be unequal of us to do it in that way. Okay, so let's have Jonathan next. Thank you for doing this, Jonathan, on the spur of the moment.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I have listened to the sort of relevant portion of the recording on YouTube whilst trying to keep an eye on proceedings today. So basically what happened was that Steve, during the debate, did ask for clarification twice as to members' wishes, and suggested that as a result of listening to the debate that the first floor extension was to be reconsidered in terms of its design and materials, but the principle was to be accepted, and you as chair added that better images were to be required as well, and then put that as a suggestion to the meeting. And a motion was then proposed and seconded. During the voting session, Councillor Brooks raised a query about whether, if it was to be delegated, that what she described as the second floor extension was to be accepted. And the response from Steve was that it was confirmed that it would be deferred rather than delegated to officers.
Yeah.
And will be coming back to panel, but it didn't answer the question of whether the second floor was to be accepted or not. But Councillor Brooks did accept that. So the motion wasn't altered by that query and carried on in terms of the vote. And after the vote, you as chair did ask Steve to sum up for the minutes and for the recording, just to clarify what had been agreed. So again, Steve confirmed that the item was deferred to consider design and materials, the first floor extension, and to flesh out the conditions as well. So in terms of a motion, I think basically it's what we could say is that the application was deferred for further discussion with regard to the design and materials of the first floor extension, and for clearer images of what is proposed, and to provide more detail on the conditions. So it's effectively as minuted, but with the addition of the requirement for clearer images of what is to be proposed. So that's my reading of the recording.
Thank you. That does reflect my recollections, and I do recall the question from Councillor Brooks, and I do recall us moving on from that position in the way that you've described. What do I do now, Nicole? Should I ask people to vote?
So what I could do, Chair, is just to clarify that a little bit further. What Jonathan's described is what was in as in the draft minutes, other than the reference to clearer images. But also, just for those members who have received the email from Mr. Woods, who is the chair of the Airborough Civic Society, in that he suggests that no vote took place to confirm members were accepting of some form of extension, i.e. the principle of the extension. But that was never moved as part of any motion. It was never included in any motion, and therefore that is why no vote was taken on the principle of the extension. Having said that, the details around the extension and how it was designed will be included in what was moved, which was material and design, and further details on conditions, all of which was agreed would be deferred to go in, get the negotiations, and then bring back for members to have another full discussion. And so on that basis, I would be advising that the minutes as drafted, unless you wanted to tweak slightly, which is entirely a choice for members, do reflect the principle of the motion and what was actually moved and voted on and carried.
Well, I personally would be happy to go along with what you've just suggested, Nicole, but I see that Councillor Brooks wants to come in. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. My recollection of the meeting was that the principle of the second story extension was never agreed. So that aspect of the application was to come back for discussion and agreement at a later meeting. Can you confirm that, please, Nicole?
So, Chair, that what was moved and carried in a vote was exactly what was just described by Jonathan. So that was, it was deferred for, Jonathan's got the specific word, and so apologies, I'm paraphrasing. It was deferred for more negotiations and information around the material and design and conditions. So, and that makes sense really, because as members are aware, you are asked to assess the actual application before you. And whilst you can make amendments or tweaks or impose further conditions, the principle of what's there before you is what you're really being asked to assess. What wasn't moved was a refusal because of the actual principle of the extension. Having said that, that doesn't mean that negotiations with the applicant, I don't know how they are going or what's going on, but for the purposes of the minutes, they should reflect not the verbatim conversation, and that is some of the things that Mr. Wood has set out in his email. They have to reflect what the motion was and what the vote was, even if some members had different views or certain comments that didn't then bring itself into the motion.
Councillor Brooks, my recollection of this as well is exactly as you've described. I do recall you raising the in principle issue, and I satisfied myself in my head that what we'd agreed for deferral would mean that if we couldn't reach agreement on the design and materials of the extension in situ, then it would be refused on that basis. So that would take care of that in a sense, that there was no need at that point for an agreement in principle, given what we were going to reconsider.
Chair, may I just jump in a tiny bit?
Yes.
I think the minutes do reflect accurately what was discussed at the plans panel. And because there was a split in the members, I think there were possibly 2 members that had a bit of an issue with the principle of the first floor. I was very careful to make sure that we got clarity as officers to go back to the applicant as to what we were discussing, but at the same time leave the decision-making responsibility with panel ultimately. Hence the deferral and not to bring back to panel and not to delegate it to officers. So I think the minutes do cover Councillor Brooks' point. So, you know, we've gone away, we've spoken to the applicant, we have started to negotiate on alternative renderings for the upper story. But at the end of the day, when it comes back to panel, if members are unhappy with that, well, it's fully within the panel's remit to make a different decision. So it was all very carefully worded to keep the responsibility and the decision making within the panel's grasp, but at the same time give the applicant the opportunity to amend the design of the first floor element. It's that simple enough. So I do think it covers the issue.
Yeah, and I do believe that, having listened to it very, very recently, that is an accurate reflection of what happened as well.
So are we happy to agree the minutes then? Would anyone like to come in, having heard what Jonathan's had to say? Councillor Ray.
If it means that actually we're not happy with what comes back, and that effectively means we decline the design, then that's fine. If it's just simply that the wording is such a way that it's capture all rather than probably the specifics, I think the person who sent the email was asking for on our recollections, then that's fine. If it's capture all, it's capture all. I think what some of us are just concerned is that we're giving a blanket to the extension when actually we might not like what comes back, and I think that's been clarified by Jonathan. So my objections to the original minutes in that sense have been resolved.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Well, to be honest, Chair, my recollection is similar to yours. And I think it's a case of what we thought we were saying, which may not have sounded like what. Because I think there was some discussion about the principle, but we were particularly, I think we probably, that became secondary because the materials, etc., were just not acceptable. And it almost seems to me that if you look on page 10, on the paragraph below the bullet points, the first sentence says, in summary, we felt members were accepting of some form of extension on the first floor. Actually, I don't think that sentence is true. The rest of that paragraph is fine, as far as I'm concerned. So if we have the minutes without that sentence, I'd be okay.
I could support that actually, Colin, because I don't think we explicitly ever said we agreed in principle with it. We just didn't say we're not agreeing the principle, but I would go along with what you've said. Councillor Brooks.
I was going to suggest exactly the same thing as Councillor Campbell, so thank you. Thank you, Colin.
Would others be in agreement with what's been suggested? Please indicate if, well, yeah, that'll do.
Chair, if I could just add again, having listened to it again just within the last hour, Steve did take pains to ask for clarification twice that the principle was accepted and that it was the design and materials that were to be reconsidered. And that was part of the motion that you suggested be put forward to be considered. I mean, clearly in accepting the principle, it doesn't mean to say that we accept any form of extension in terms of its design or materials, which is within the gift of members to refuse at the next meeting. But
I don't think Chair, with respect, I don't think we're saying that there shouldn't be an extension. What we're simply saying is, it's a slightly different approach, isn't it? That you know, if we're saying we agreed the principle, if they come along with a design which is meets our stringent requirements, then I don't think that's an issue. But as I say, I think that first sentence is not what panel thought they were saying at that meeting. And as I say, I don't actually believe that if we took that out, it precludes them coming back with an application or with a set of drawings which includes an extension, which we may or may not choose to agree. But I do think that sentence doesn't reflect what I thought we agreed.
Well, it may not reflect what we thought we said, Colin, but from the sound of it, it does reflect what we accepted in a summary that was put to us, which is a difficult one. Is there a way forward for us, Nicole, here?
Chair, the resolution is the important part. Yes, the minutes help reflect the general basis of debate, but the resolution is what is the important part, because that is what members of the panel decided must happen next. And as we've been discussing, that is going to come back, and it is still open to members. If it comes back with the extension and members are not happy that it's acceptable in planning terms, then members have another opportunity to either move refusal or to seek further changes if they feel like it's not far from what would be acceptable. So you know, if members feel so strongly that they want to remove, I assume we're talking about, sorry, I'm looking at a different screen with it on. In summary, it was felt that members were accepting of some form of extension at first floor. If members feel so strongly about that and they want to move to remove that, it doesn't change the resolution, it just changes the minute, the minute that's reflecting the general debate beforehand.
Well, Nicole, if you say that that's possible to do, I personally would like to do it.
Someone just needs to move that amendment to the minutes, Chair, and then take a vote.
I'll move it.
Thank you. Does someone have to second it as well, Nicole?
Yes, please.
Could I have a seconder for that?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Do we now take a formal vote on it, Nicole?
Yes, please.
Okay, so if you are in favour of removing the sentence that we have been referring to, please say for, otherwise against or abstain. Councillor Anderson.
For.
Councillor Brooks.
For.
Councillor Campbell.
For.
Councillor Finnegan.
For.
Councillor Hamilton.
Abstain, because my recollection is different.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hesselwood.
For.
Councillor Reagan.
Abstain.
Councillor Shemilt. Oh, she's not managed to get in. Councillor Ray.
For.
And I will vote for as well. So that is carried. Do you want to summarise, Andy?
Yeah, that was 7 members for, Chair, and 2 abstained.
Okay, thank you very much. So on that basis, are we able to move forward on the minutes issue? Anybody want to disagree? Right, Colin, your hand's still up. I presume you've left it up, have you? You're muted as well.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much indeed, folks. That's been a good afternoon session, made some good decisions. Thank you very much for your cooperation, your attendance and your hard work. And we'll see you at the next meeting.